morning, everyone. This is update for September 5, 2022, day 194 of the war, end of the date update. So first, let's actually discuss a little bit energy, global energy situation, since we haven't touched that in a while because of all of the activities that's been going on in Kherson, and we put our resources and efforts on gathering information about that. So now let's touch base a little bit on what's going on in the world of energy. I would say the world of pain. First of all, UK, Liz Truss looks like she's going to be next Prime Minister of the UK, which creates light at the end of the tunnel for the UK economy. Because first thing she did, she vowed that she's going to allow drilling in North Sea and basically oil and gas exploration, and also support for nuclear power stations. That's the only reasonable solution, given the whole war situation and where everything is heading. Basically, UK will be able to create relatively cheap energy supply for the economy, so the economy remains viable and competitive on the world scale in the long run. And that's assuming that she's gonna deliver on what she's promises, and that someone in a year is not gonna come and completely reverse the course and totally nosedive UK economy into complete disaster. Because as you can look at the exchange rate to US dollar, UK currency is on its way to go to the parity with US dollar if things continue the way they are. But the summary is that it will be some time for the UK before things get sort of more normal and better, given the whole situation, because all of these energy projects, they require a lot of resources, first of all, and then they require a lot of time. They don't come online overnight or in a month or in 10 months. It's usually years, like 3, 4, 5 years before the energy supply will increase at competitive prices. But at least there is light at the end of the tunnel for the UK, which we cannot say the same for Europe, which mostly driven by the German policy. And there we still see the stubborn resistance to correct the course and to actually do sort of real things that really work, that have ability to solve the problem. And because Germany still vows that they're not going to allow long-term use of nuclear power, which is obviously creates the competitive pressure on the German economy, which right now is totally not competitive on the world scale at this point, because the German economy was built on quality is one thing, but one important thing was input of all of this energy resources, mostly from Russia. This problem actually started not 10 years ago, not because of Schroeder, not because of Merkel. It started actually around like early 70s, when there has been made decision in Germany. German political sort of top decided to make Germany or German economy dependent on the natural gas supply or energy supply from the Soviet Union. It all started then. It just at that time the Soviet Union didn't have the leverage against the Germany, because German energy supply was more or less balanced, where there were nuclear power, there were coal, there were natural gas, there were all sort of source, and some probably have a little bit of hydropower, but as far as we know, Germany doesn't have hydropower potential really at all. So, but at least it was balanced, and with probably past 20 years, that balance was completely destroyed, where there's alternative energy that has a lot of its shortcomings, and those shortcomings were not openly and honestly admitted by the sort of political ruling class in Germany. And as a result, Germany basically become totally dependent on the natural gas. And that created huge opportunity for Russia specifically to basically leverage for Russia, essentially blackmail Germany, which ended up in cut off of natural gas supply, which apparently happened past 24 hours. Russia stopped supplying natural gas to Europe, generally speaking, as preemptive strike for the ceilings on the prices of natural gas, because there were discussions between in the West about putting a ceiling on price ceiling on an energy supplies from Russia. So Russia struck preemptively, which again you can see Russia is sort of ahead in responding to the situation. They just simply cut off completely supply to Europe, essentially. The problem with all of this is that even though there are reports of, oh, we have filled natural gas storage to, let's say, 80-90% or whatever, some high numbers, those numbers are totally misleading because they assume continuous supply of Russian natural gas, and because it's not coming, those storages will be used up in a matter of months to whatever, 2.5 months, depending on the country and the situation. So, and then you end up being in total energy free fall. So that's why Europe is continental Europe. Let's put this way, is on a collision course. Let's put this way, and it doesn't look there is a light of the at the end of the tunnel for continental Europe. So that's a sort of summary of the energy situation, which obviously affects war in Ukraine, and it's all sort of system of connected vessels, basically. Now let's go back to our military overview. And as a general situation, just as a heads up, the Ukrainian offensive has essentially stalled on the Kherson bridgehead. It's not because the Russian side is sort of like taking upper hand. There are other reasons. It's a sort of normal sort of stoppage in the course of action, but we'll discuss it in detail what's going on there once we get there. But let's just start right now our typical walkthrough in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. The action along the state border continues sort of at somewhat elevated level. We just report this just to make it clear to everyone that this is not quiet section of the front line, that hostilities are happening along the state border here, and it's sort of both sides need to keep some small level of resources, military resources along the entire state border, which stretches their resources and creates defensive and offensive relatively more difficult on both sides. Now let's move to Kharkiv section of the front line. Things here are relatively quiet, just exchange of all sorts of fires, but no even small-scale action here. Now let's move to Izyum bridgehead. Things here were surprisingly relatively quiet here. There are some reports that some of the units are being pulled from here to Kherson bridgehead. This is unconfirmed. We just want to share because this is important and interesting development. At the same time, we don't have it's not like 100% reliable. It's not even 90% reliable. It's just, okay, there are reports that this is happening, but to what extent, it's unclear. So specifically, there are reports that 38th Brigade has been transferred to Kherson bridgehead. More specifically, what remains of the sort of remnants of the 38th Brigade, because it's not in sort of full strength and so on. So this is more of like, okay, whatever we have, we throw there. Now let's move to North Donbass section of the front line. Here things somewhat similar. There is some sort of new development. It looks like Russian command is trying to renew attack here in the northern section, because they tried in the southern and central, and that doesn't lead to anywhere. And they just basically looking for the weak spot in Ukrainian defenses. So they're just kind of like a goal seeking this whole situation, trying to find where there is weakness, essentially. Otherwise, so that's why there was attack near Hehorivka here, just a probing, just to check what's going on there in terms of Ukrainian defenses. Otherwise, there's typical situation: Russian attacks in Soledar, with obviously goal to capture the town. Attacks in Bakhmut, so sort of typical situation. Then attack in Vesela Dolina, in Kadema, all sort of standard action without much success, generally speaking. Now let's move to more south. Let's see what's going on the central Donbass front line, which is west of Donetsk. Here the main sort of focus was Pisky, the salient in Pisky, where the Russian troops trying to exploit. They basically attacking all of these points, as we mentioned many times before. Russian sources claim that they started getting into the eastern outskirts of Pervomaysk. To what extent it's true, we don't know. Just reporting at the face value, but essentially, as you can see, since August 21st, the front line hasn't moved really here at this point. Now let's look what's going on on the Zaporizhzhia front line. Things here, as it's quiet so far. No big moves here at this point. Now let's just jump to Kherson bridgehead, which is the main focus and where the whole action is, and where the attention of both higher commands are. Now I'll explain what's sort of happening here. So what happened is that Ukrainian troops having difficulty sort of supplying this bridgehead on the eastern bank of river Ingulets, which is Ingulets River. And so seems like they build those kind of like affordable bridges, or whatever you call them. I don't even know what's the right way to describe it. And also using some pontoon bridges and ferries and so on. So basically everything goes to continue the supply of Ukrainian troops. So that kind of created slowdown in Ukrainian move in the eastern direction and southeastern direction here, obviously, which goal is which I mentioned before, is Nova Kakhovka. The first immediate goal is Bereslav, which is here on the western side, and Kakhovka is kind of like a sister town on the eastern side. So that's a goal here. Then situation here in the northern part has sort of more or less stabilized in terms of Russian troops withdrew. They have now a more stable defensive line. So Ukrainian side needs to sort of throw more resources to breach through this new front line. So essentially what happened in sort of summary, while Ukrainian troops managed to squeeze Russian troops, they didn't really sort of defeat it, and it was more or less orderly withdrawal of Russian troops here in the north, meaning that they are able to continue defensive operations, and they sort of able to continue the fight at this moment. So that's a whole sort of key point here. There was no like full-scale breach of Russian defenses and sort of degradation of the Russian defensive system here. So it still operates. It's at its minimum because of the poor supplies. So that's the biggest challenge for the Russian troops right now, because they, as we mentioned many million times before, they rely on heavy artillery fire. That's how they essentially stop Ukrainian advances and they do their own advances and offensives. So now, because there is a shortage of artillery shells, they cannot use as much as at will, and they're basically kind of like, they're used to that. That's kind of like a part of mentality of approach how they do it, and now they don't have it. So in a way, it's like think about the drug addict now doesn't have a drug or have very minimal amount of the drug, and so he cannot do much because the rest of the sort of body of the functions are not there to sort of work on their own. They really need this artillery support, and it's not there at this point. So what we know is that there are only 2 ferries that are functioning across the Dnipro River, and this is obviously totally not enough for the supply of Russian troops here, for them to operate the way they used to operate, or the way they designed to operate. So they cannot operate in a normal sort of their normal way, and therefore there are problems at this point here. And the only reason there is sort of nothing big happening here is because Ukrainian command has put more or less what they could into this offensive in between Davydiv Brid and Snegurivka, and they need to bring their own more resources and reserves, and also create stable supply across Ingulets River, which has been a challenge, let's put it this way. But that looks like that problem has been sort of slowly resolved, and Ukrainian command may kind of resume or may not. It really obviously depends, but we definitely think there is a tremendous pressure to resume sort of this advance. We cannot even really truly call this offensive. It's more like some kind of like something new in a sort of military in sort of military science, if there is such thing as a science in this. It's more like an art in many ways, but nevertheless, so this is what's going on right now. So Russian troops don't have enough artillery support. The only sort of saving grace for Russian sort of troops in command is that Ukrainian side is not really, also doesn't have many heavy weapons or enough heavy weapons. And the most important, there is a problem in terms of like medium level command. It's frequently not very competent, or I would say very bluntly incompetent. And so that allows a lot of opportunity for Russian forces not to be totally defeated and decimated, and kind of like in the north to withdraw in more or less orderly way with some losses, but they are not sort of critical losses for ability to continue defensive actions. There are also, as I mentioned, there are reports that parts of the 38th brigade has been brought in here to stabilize the situation, because apparently airborne divisions are not enough, but this could be totally incorrect report, just reporting at the face value. That's why it's not on the map, because it's all very extremely speculative basically here. But as a summary, the Ukrainian sort of command, Ukrainian troops created cracks or created extreme difficulty for the Russian side, but they did not break the will. They did not create a decisive sort of solution, sort of the decisive moment for themselves. So where this whole thing is going with this whole offensive, or whatever you would call it, is this is going to be, as mentioned before many times, is going to be death by 1,000 cuts, where the Ukrainian troops just gonna like do these small advances and eventually squeeze out Russian troops out of this bridgehead. There is a chance that it will like suddenly collapse in disorderly withdrawal of Russian troops. There is that chance, but I would say if we sort of kind of like scale this scenarios, the scenario of slow withdrawal and slow squeeze is more likely than disorderly collapse of the Russian front line. But that's possible as well. It's extremely hard to understand at how little of the ammunition Russian side is getting, because that's really the answer to this situation, to the key to this situation. So that's kind of like at a high level what's happening right now here. Let's just quickly jump through this whole situation. Was first day of offensive. This is second one. Ukrainian troops advanced and increased the bridgehead. This is third day. This is fourth, as you can see. This is the yesterday where Ukrainian troops managed to kind of create pretty good foundation for this bridgehead. So it's not going to be very unlikely that it's going to be destroyed, at least not in the current situation. And let's actually look now at the northern situation. This was the first day. This is the second. This is this Russian troops being in essentially kind of pocket or with a tactical pocket, whatever you call. Then they try to break through, but they initially actually tried to restore the situation, kind of like create this salient and sort of continue holding to Vysokopilya and Olgina. However, after the unsuccessful attempts to do so, they decided to withdraw, which were reported yesterday, and this is now more or less stable Russian line of defense. We still don't know for sure if Russian forces still control Zolota Balka or they kind of withdrew a little bit south of it because they a little bit kind of like outflanked here and they don't have enough resources to sort of cover the flanks and even do any counteroffensive, small scale counteroffensive in case this is going to get cut off here. So this is unclear situation here, but in any case, there is no sort of strong salient right now for the Russian side. And so that creates more stable front line for them, at least for now, for the next couple days. Remains to be seen if Ukrainian side command is willing to sort of throw more resources into the fight, because so far this whole offensive was expensive, but it's sort of like normal expensiveness. All offensives are expensive in terms of consumption of the resources. Where there is a problem is that these expenses did not pay off, that the return on this sort of investment wasn't quite there. That's where the problem is all of this. So now it looks like Ukrainian command will need to do sort of double down in terms of expenses again, invest, and in the hope that they can make decisive breach of the Russian defensive positions. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.